A $2 trillion people are crying because white folks don't want to teach black children who they are. I want you to think about that for a minute. Think about that psychosis. Think about that mental illness. A $2 trillion people, the American African family, a $2 trillion people is crying because white folks don't want to teach black kids where they come from. We suffer from the disease of irresponsibility. We want no responsibility for our own survival. We want no responsibility for our own redemption. We want no responsibility for our own longevity. The more things change, the more they stay the same. See, we keep on waiting for the government to change things for African people. We have supreme faith in the government. The North American African has supreme confidence in the European's ability to self-correct his own mistakes. And if you believe that the European has the ability, the American white power structure, if you believe it has the ability to self-correct its own mistakes, can you give me some examples of where that has ever happened? Can you give me some examples of where that has ever happened? Show me where. Show Ifatunde Oguntade where the European power structure has ever self-corrected its own mistakes. See, what we're dealing with here is the failure of melanin-dominated people. The failure of melanin-dominant people. That's you, the African, the original man and woman. We are melanin-dominant. We are melanin-dominant. The melanin-dominant people of North America still haven't figured out the behavior and psychology of melanin deficiency. Because from a psychobiological perspective, we're dealing with a conflict of reality, narrative, consciousness, and culture between melanin dominant and melanin deficient. Let's take it to the biological, because y'all like keeping it at the religious. Y'all like keeping it at the social. Let's go to the psychobiological. We are in conflict because we are melanin dominant and they are melanin deficient. We produce organic melanin. They produce artificial melanin. The more melanin you have, the more humane you are. The less melanin you have, the less humane you are. That's why when you look at the human hierarchy from original man to artificial man, you see the humanity reduces itself every step of the way down the human hierarchy from melanin dominant to melanin deficient. And what I don't understand, why would melanin dominant people want to reproduce with melanin deficient people? Somebody help me understand. I need somebody to help me understand, overstand, and understand. Why would melanin dominant people want to reproduce with melanin deficient people? I'm going to tell you why. Somebody did something to your mind. Somebody did something to your consciousness. Somebody did something to your worldview. Somebody traumatized your spirituality. Because no melanin dominant person in their right mind, no melanin dominant person in their right mind would reproduce with a melanin deficient person. But the problem with the North American Negro, the problem of a North American Negro from Toronto to Texas, the problem with the North American Negro from Toronto, Canada to Texas, is religion has been introduced into the narrative of political interpretation for African people. And since religion has been introduced into the narrative of the political interpretation of African people, our common sense has been hampered. Our common sense has been hindered. Our common sense has been hurt because we've been led to believe that if our behavior is not consistent with the Gospels of Christ, as written by the Caucasians, we have been brainwashed into believing that if our behavior isn't consistent with the gospel of Christ as written by the Caucasian, then we are somehow ungodly. And we have been so brainwashed with this Christian Islamic concept of ungodliness that we would rather see every African on earth before we disobey the laws of the New Testament. So the Bible as a book printed by Caucasians is more important to African people than the survival of melanin-dominant people. We could care less if there was an extermination of melanin-dominant people as long as the Bible is being upheld. A book has become more important than black people. I said a book has become more important than black people. And you keep running around telling me how much you've been saved. No disrespect. But how you going to be asking me if I'm saved? Because my next question after you ask me, have you been saved? My next question, saved from what? What exactly have you been saved from? You got Negroes running around with a modified Kemetic ankh called the Christ, the cross, the crucifix, fabricated ankh, plagiarized ankh, bootleg Kemetic ankh, saying you've been saved. And I'm trying to find out for the life of me, and I love all of you, but for the life of Ifatunde, for the life of Dr. Oguntade, can somebody explain to me what exactly have you been saved from? Because you keep telling me you've been saved. Have you been saved from police brutality? Have you been saved from the COVID vaccination? Have you been saved from mass incarceration? Have our children been saved from miseducation? Have we been saved from homelessness? Have we been saved from cancer? Have we been saved from political exploitation? Have we been saved from economic apartheid? Have we been saved of unemployment? Have we been saved of black on black crime? What exactly have you been saved from when you tell me you have been saved? Help me understand, overstand, and understand. Why are we still crying about Governor Ron DeSantis removing black history from the textbooks, removing racism from the textbooks, removing slavery from the textbooks? Away from the centennial of Black History Month, and y'all crying because white people don't want to teach black children who they are and where they come from. It's not their job. It's not their job. It's not their job. It is not the job of the Caucasian to teach African children where they come from. Would you please cut it out? Would you please cut it out? Would you please cut it out? It is not the job of the oppressor to educate the oppressed. We are 2 years away from the centennial of Black History Month, 1926 to 2026, and we still crying about white people not teaching black children where they come from. Will you please wake up? We can teach black history in church. We can teach black history at home. We can teach black history in the community center. Stop crying about Ron DeSantis when you are $2 billion people. That's the post-traumatic slavery disease. A $2 trillion people are crying because white folks don't want to teach black children who they are. I want you to think about that for a minute. Think about that psychosis. Think about that mental illness. A $2 trillion people, the American African family, a $2 trillion people is crying because white folks don't want to teach black kids where they come from. The disease of irresponsibility. The disease of irresponsibility. The disease of irresponsibility. The disease of irresponsibility. We suffer from the disease of irresponsibility. We want no responsibility for our own survival. We want no responsibility for our own redemption. We want no responsibility for our own longevity. What did the Honorable Frederick Douglass say about you Negroes 100 years ago? What did the Honorable Frederick Douglass say about you kind of Negroes 150 years ago? Frederick Douglass said, quote, "A people who will not fight for themselves are not worth being fought for by others." I'm going to say it again. This is what Frederick Douglass said about you handkerchief head plantation Democratic Party. Frederick Douglass said, "A people who will not fight for themselves when they have the means to do so are not worth being fought for by others." Frederick Douglass said, "A man who does not value his own freedom will not value your freedom." Frederick Douglass said, "It is senseless to put a man on his feet if the next minute his head will be back on the concrete." Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Douglass said, "Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice that will be used against them."